Father in heaven, thank you so much for bringing us here today. Father, I feel your spirit and your love in this congregation, and I thank you for your many blessings. As I speak this morning, Father, I pray that the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts will be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. So, good morning. All right, so this morning I wanted to talk to you about salt and light. And we went through the memory verse, or the verse, you are the salt of the earth, you are the light of the world. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. And, we tend to think about salt and light as being two so very different things, and they are. But I found this photo, and this is a Himalayan salt lamp, and I didn't know these existed, but are they not the perfect symbol of salt and light existing together? Yes, so it is possible. Now, I like the King James Version, I really do. But I want to read verse 13 in the New International Version. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. So, salt and light, salt representing the physical and light the spiritual. And both were essential features of Jesus' ministry here on earth. Wherever he went, he healed the sick, the blind gained their sight, lepers were cured of their illnesses, paralytics walked, and even the dead were raised. But the crowds didn't just come for the physical healing. They came for the spiritual lessons that he was giving. They came to learn of the true God, of his compassion and his forgiveness. Now, our modern world is a funny place. It tells us that the physical and the spiritual should be separate, that you can live a perfectly good and a perfectly secular life, that as long as you conform to the values and beliefs of society, then you will have been a good person. Well, there's no real need to pay attention to anything spiritual, but maybe the spiritual is okay as long as it doesn't intrude on your public life. And spirituality and religion are different now too, right? I've heard people say, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. But I don't believe that the separation of church and state should extend to our souls. I believe that we are whole beings and must incorporate both salt and light, both the physical and the spiritual, both good works and evangelism. And from its earliest days, the church has embraced both roles. After Jesus' crucifixion, the apostles and disciples traveled to all corners of the known world to spread the good news of the incarnation. We also read in Acts how they came together with one spirit and one accord to serve their community. And when a dispute arose about whether the Hebrew widows were being treated better than the Greek widows, the church came together and appointed 7 men to administer that ministry fairly. And they weren't random appointments. They deliberated and they chose men who had the reputation of being fair. So the early church had those elements of salt and light working together. Now, before refrigeration, food was preserved in a variety of ways, including smoking, pickling, drying, and of course, salting. Without being preserved, food would quickly spoil. John R.W. Stott, in an article entitled 4 Ways Christians Can Influence the World Today, which was printed in Christianity Today many years ago, said the following, and I'm paraphrasing most of it. Well, not most of it, but I'm cutting out a few pieces. In both these metaphors of the salt and the light, Jesus teaches about the responsibility of Christians and non-Christians, between the church and the world, and he emphasizes the influences Christians ought to have on the non-Christian environment. The distinction between the two is clear. The world, he says, is like rotting meat, but you are to be the world's salt. The world is like a dark night, but you are to be the world's light. This is the fundamental difference between the Christian and the non-Christian, the church and the world. Then he goes on from the distinction to the influence. Like salt and putrefying meat, Christians are to hinder social decay. Like light in the prevailing darkness, Christians are to illumine society and to show it a better way. God's church is as different from the old society as salt from rotting meat and as light from darkness. But there are too many people whose whole preoccupation is with maintaining the distinction. The salt must retain its saltiness, they say. It must not become contaminated. The light must maintain its brightness. It must not be smothered by the darkness. And that is true, but that is merely survival. Salt and light are not just a little bit different from their environment. They're to have a powerful influence on their environment. The salt is to be rubbed into the meat in order to stop the rot. The light is to shine in the darkness. It is to be set upon a lampstand, and it is to give light to the environment. Now, we cannot serve our purpose as Christians if we segregate ourselves from the rest of the world. Our influence is needed. Now, when doing research for this sermon, I discovered that there are many different kinds of salt. So you'll see from the photo, all different kinds of colors. So we've got common table salt, we've got kosher salt, we have sea salt. Himalayan salt is actually the purest form of salt in the world, and it's rich in minerals and used in spa treatments as well as in the kitchen. There's Celtic sea salt, which is harvested from the bottom of tidal ponds off the coast of France, and they are gray, chunky, and have a briny taste. There is fleur de sel, which is a caviar of salts, also harvested from the seas off the coast of France, and it is blue-gray and is the most expensive. In Hawaii, there are two different kinds, black lava salt and red salt. And the red one was used for centuries in ceremonies for cleansing, purification, and, believe it or not, the blessing of tools. So all of these salts have different origins. They vary in appearance and taste. They go through different processes to become what they are, but they're all edible. Let's think about light. Our sun is a giant ball of gas which fuses hydrogen atoms into helium and creates light. A fire is created when some combustible material, such as wood or gasoline, is heated enough while oxygen is present. Lightning is created by the interaction of protons and electrons in the upper atmosphere, which generate an electric current. But light isn't limited to the inorganic. Light can also be created by animals. One example is the firefly. While the light one firefly creates is not as brilliant as a lightning strike, together they can light up a forest. Then there are bioluminescent jellyfish. Deep under the ocean, in places where the sun's light doesn't penetrate, creatures like jellyfish create their own light. Did you know that plants can also emit light? I didn't. There are some bioluminescent mushrooms. And then there are man-made sources of light. Light is created in many ways, under many different circumstances, but in all of the examples I just gave, that light is visible. Now, why am I telling you all this? Why am I telling you all about different kinds of salt and different kinds of light? Because just like salt and light, we are all different. We come from different places. We vary in character and personality. We all go through different experiences in life. But in God's plan, we all have a calling. And make no mistake, we can choose to ignore it. But just as there are consequences for our actions, there are also consequences for our lack of action. We are to be the salt of the earth and the light of the world. We are to work to bless society, and we are to do it in different ways. This only makes sense as we are all gifted with different talents and spheres of influence. It also makes sense because the problems that face us are so very varied. Hunger, poverty, disease, ignorance, selfishness, and all other issues need to be addressed. Some of us are gifted with skills and abilities that make us natural fits for community service and similar ministries. Others are gifted with skills and abilities that bring people from spiritual darkness into light. But all of us are to work together in harmony to fulfill the Great Commission. At the last General Conference session, I learned that the Seventh-day Adventist Church administers the second largest health system and the second largest education system in the world. We should be proud. Our denomination was officially started 156 years ago in 1863. We currently have approximately 20 million members, and it has been reported that 25 million worship weekly in our churches, and that we have churches in 202 of the 230 countries. According to Wikipedia, we may be the most widespread Protestant denomination. The global population is approximately 7.2 billion. So as Adventists, we comprise maybe 0.27%. And it's not intuitive that a denomination representing only 0.27% would have the second largest health and education systems in the world. Clearly, we have an impact and we have an influence, and what that tells me is that we are blessed and the Lord is with us. Now, ADRA is a Seventh-day Adventist Church's official humanitarian agency, and we are tasked with responding to disasters and alleviating poverty. There are over 140 ADRA offices around the world, all with the same values and beliefs, working to empower communities and to change lives, because our purpose is to serve humanity so that all may live as God intended. And it's because of the support of churches like you and programs like Toonies that make a difference that we're able to do that. So, last year we ran 66 projects in 26 countries, helping over 814,000 people. In Indonesia, we are helping thousands to recover after the devastating earthquakes and tsunami that struck over 6 months ago. We were helping them by giving out shelter kits and food. In Nepal, we're continuing to help villagers impacted by the 2015 earthquake to recover their livelihoods. Last July, we finished building some classrooms for a damaged school. In Yemen, we are providing medical care and emergency food rations to those affected by the ongoing civil war, which has been declared the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. ADRA Yemen is actually the largest NGO in that country. In the Democratic Republic of the Congo, we are giving food rations and helping to fight an outbreak of cholera. Bangladesh is hosting over 1 million Rohingya refugees from Myanmar. Before their arrival, the camps where they live now were undeveloped land. They were not connected to an electrical grid or a water or sewer system. The camps have had to be built from the bottom up. The jungle has been cut down for firewood. The hills are now covered with temporary shelters. Floodwaters from the monsoons and cyclones pool everywhere, and more than 50% of the people in the camps are women and children. And I just wanted to say a little bit about this photo. I think I counted once, and there are 9 taps in my house. I don't know how many water taps you have in your houses. But in these camps, there are no taps in people's shelters. So everyone has to go to these water points. And all of those jugs, every single one of them is representative of a lady or a young girl waiting for water. So they leave their jugs in line and then come back when it's their turn. And whatever they gather, and it's rationed, that is their supply for the day. So in partnership with the Global ADRA Network and the Canadian Food Grains Bank, we have provided food to over 50,000 Rohingya refugees. We have provided more durable temporary shelters. And this is a photo here of what it looks like during the monsoon season. And as you can see, there's water everywhere. And so we hired some of the refugees to start building those pathways that you see. And this keeps people from getting sick because the water's contaminated. You don't know what's in there. There could be bacteria, there could be cholera, there could be snakes. sewage. And so building things like the pathways, and there's some stairways up the mountain, really do make a difference. Now, the shelters we are building have 2 rooms, which is quite unique, actually, because usually shelters only have 1 room. And the reason that we do that is because 1 room is a special difficulty for women. Having 2 rooms enables families to have much-needed privacy. And this is a photo of one of the stairs. So nothing complicated, nothing fancy, but things that are really simple and make people's lives so much better. Now, this is northern Kenya. For years, northern Kenya has been suffering from a drought. Streams have dried up, animals have died, and people are hungry. 6 years ago, in partnership again with the Canadian Food Grains Bank, we started an emergency food program, but we knew that it wasn't going to be enough. We could provide food for several months, but we wanted to do more. We wanted to help the people of the area become more resilient, so we started another project. The people here are not farmers. Their income comes from their animals. And this project was different from the others. We taught the community ways to capture rainfall, preserve grazing land, and how to farm in arid areas. Families used to leave in the dry period and walk hundreds of miles in search of water and pasture. But what we have taught them enables them to remain in their homes for all except about 2 weeks of the year. So this is what the landscape looks like without us. And these 2 are what it looks like with our projects. And that particular garden, I mean, it has papaya, it has bananas, it has peas, it has limes. It was quite lush. I remember talking to the ladies, and they said, their only problem was that the men like to harvest from them in the dark. And the men said they were helping. In Thailand, we are supporting a shelter that allows girls at risk of trafficking to get an education. In the Philippines, Nepal, and Rwanda, we have started savings and loan groups. The groups bring the community together. The members of the groups are taught about saving and budgeting. In areas where it's otherwise difficult to get a loan, they provide a means for members to start or improve their businesses, pay their children's school tuition, or take care of emergency medical needs. Now, on average, 830 women die each day during pregnancy and childbirth. That's over 300,000 a year. And our 2 largest projects are addressing this issue. We're working in Cambodia, Myanmar, the Philippines, and Rwanda. And while Canada is blessed with a wonderful healthcare system, the countries where we work, the systems are not that well developed. And then on average, 16,000 children. 5,800,000 a year die from preventable causes. So in many areas of rural Rwanda, this is the ambulance. It's a woven stretcher. It's carried by 4 men, often in the dark, during the rain, over steep and slippery mountain roads. And it's not uncommon for one of the men to slip and for the lady in labor to fall to the ground. As part of the project, we have provided 3 ambulances to healthcare centers in the Nihabu district. The project originally called for 2, but we were blessed and we were able to do 3. In Cambodia, many health centers do not have, and that's what one of them looks like. They're always these kind of vehicles because they have to get over very rough mountain roads. In Cambodia, many health centers do not have maternity wards, outhouses, or electricity. So we are building maternity wards with outhouses and solar power systems so that babies can be delivered safely, even in the middle of the night. In Canada, we are working with First Nations communities to address health and community issues. So this is a tiny garden that one of our project participants in Northern Ontario is growing. And we're also working with communities experiencing local disasters, such as the recent floods in Ontario and the wildfires in Alberta. Now, when I visit our projects, I always ask the people that we're helping if they've ever heard of ADRA before. And guess what they answer? No. Most people have never heard of ADRA before. Sometimes they heard the name, but they didn't know really what we were. And then I ask if you've ever heard about Adventists before. Guess what they say? No. However, because of the work that we are doing in their communities, the knowledge of Seventh-day Adventism is spreading. We didn't start with 140 offices around the world. After World War II, the church saw the devastation in Europe and decided to do something. And out of that came ADRA. And last year, we touched the lives of over 20 million people globally. As a church, we have the potential to reach so many more. Christianity is powerful in its practicality. And your church has started. And I want to encourage you to keep going. Your project, every Toonie that gets added to another Toonie, is helping to support the things that I just talked to you about and so many more. I was listening to a lot of the service that went before, and I just heard so many echoes of what I wanted to tell you. But God is not going to entrust a large task to us if we haven't shown any interest in the smaller ones. But we have the assurance that if we do our part, He will be with us. There is need everywhere in the world. Wherever I visit an ADRA project, the people we are helping are delighted to show us the changes in their community. But it's always accompanied by the request that we do something else. We don't usually have the funding, but we have seen so many unexpected blessings. The school that I showed you in Nepal was only possible because of a teacher who decided that she wanted to help rebuild it. Like the loaves and the fishes, what we have is being multiplied. But like the loaves and the fishes, we have to have something to work with. And I wanted to, something that struck me about that story, the little boy who offered up his loaves and fishes didn't know that he was going to get anything to eat, right? Here he is surrounded by all of these adults, all of these important people, and they're taking his lunch. He had no idea that he wasn't going to go hungry. The food might have been just given to everybody else, but he trusted that his needs would be met, and if his immediate need was not going to be met, he was fine with that sacrifice. When the meal was over, 12 large baskets of leftovers were collected, and I heard that they were the same kind of baskets that Paul was lowered over the city in to escape one time. So 12 baskets large enough to fit a man. That is a lot of food. Sometimes we have a fear that if we give away what we have, we will not have enough for ourselves. But the Bible reassures us in several places that we shall lack for nothing, that whatever we give shall be multiplied and returned to us. We may not think that we have a great deal of ability, but we can still be faithful in the calling the Lord has given us. Is it good that we should lose our saltiness? That our potential influence in this world should be withdrawn? Should we hide our light? No. Let us offer ourselves to God as instruments in His hand, as salt and light in the community. The church could have an enormous influence for good in every nation on earth if it would commit itself totally to Christ. Let us continue to give ourselves to Him who gave Himself for us.